Okay, so good morning, Atulaya. Welcome to this event, Leaders and Libraries. Before we get into the details on the great book that you have chosen, let me introduce you to the audience. So, good morning, viewers and listeners. You have been listening to multiple leaders on this event, Leaders and Libraries. We have had illustrious HR, oblique OD, L&D professionals coming and talking about a book that has inspired their journey. And we have today yet another guest, Atulaya Goswami, HR head India regions for United Phosphorus Limited, known as UPL for most of us, an executive coach, a passionate L&D oblique HR profession. He helps young minds to make the right career choice into the HR space with his very powerful and recently started, which is picking up a lot of viral space in the LinkedIn page called HR Shorts. So Atulya, that's a lovely work that you're doing there. And also an avid reader. He's also part of an LNOD community along with me, so we get to interact a lot there. So Atulya, it's a pleasure to have you on this event, and thank you for joining the force.
Thank you so much. And Rajiv, when I heard about this whole discussion on lead with the reading skills and lead with read as you call it, so I really got excited about this, and I think it's a wonderful concept, and happy to be here in the discussion today.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. So let's get started with the first question, Atulya. Tell me, Atulya and books and Atulya, how do these phrases go together?
So I think the way I will put it here is that as you rightly say in one of your posts which I saw on LinkedIn, that to lead you have to read, and that's exactly the connection, because if you have to actually get different perspectives and you have to really grow as a person. I
Hmm.
think the whole piece of that growth mindset is actually an outcome of how much actually you're aware and how much do you read about
Hmm.
things around you. I think that there's a very clear linkage,
Hmm.
and I can share that from personal experience, because I know when I was not reading how I was and when I'm reading how I am. So, right. So if I
Right.
compare the before and after situation, there's a big difference, because
Hmm.
the kind of connections you build with people, the kind of understanding of how your environment operates around you. I think there are various things which create that connection. And for
Good.
leaders, it's very important to understand that, there are different success stories of
Hmm.
different organizations, whether you read about those kind of books or whether you read about HR concepts. So books are actually, they cover pretty much all the different dimensions of, your walk of life. If you're
Right.
motivated, you need a pep talk, you read a book. If you have to become a better leader, you read a book. If you have to have some sort of recreation, you read a book. So there's so many connections. And in my life, I can tell you there are a few instances where I've
Mm-hmm.
implemented some practical stuff which I actually picked up from books. And
Beautiful.
if I may quote one of the books
Yeah,
with,
please.
is a book which was called Stories at Work,
Ah, yeah.
which I read, and that book is a brilliant explanation of how you use stories to connect with people, and that is something I used personally, during these COVID times in my organization, where when we launched the values of the company, and
Mm.
realized that your values get tested the most during tough situations, and what
True.
could be tougher than COVID, right? So we actually brought those whole concept of success stories of what we did beautifully in the organization during this period of COVID, and that was one of the connections. And there are many connections. It's a clear connection. I don't feel I'm growing if I don't read. That's the way I'll put it.
Lovely. I think that's a very lovely way of articulating what you just said. And I think Indranil in Stories at Work does a fabulous job, and his
That's true.
his thought process is very interesting, and he gets such illustrious leaders just through one or two incidents in their life. He brings them very powerfully into the organization. I too love that book. It's a marvelous one. I think you made a very powerful statement, Atulya, and thank you for making that, because that's something that I keep talking about through interventions to people, that these books are not the Chanda Mamas and Tinkles of the world. They are powerful leadership management books that have got techniques and templates and methods that can be picked up by anyone and just applied at work or personal life. And it definitely will give a difference.
Yeah.
So I think you're very right.
Yeah. And I think just to add one small point to what you said,
Mm.
books play a big role in inspiring you. I
Yeah,
think we all need a dose of inspiration every day, and these books really inspire you. And
true.
some of the books off late, like That Will Never Work, which is a Netflix story, or Big Billion Day, which is a Flipkart story. These
Yeah,
books
yeah.
are inspiring actually, and they actually make you believe that nothing is actually impossible. And that's the story of these companies. And while we work as leaders, I think
Yeah,
that's the mindset which we first need to have before we can
absolutely.
walk the talk.
Absolutely.
You should really walk the talk, and these things actually inspire you a lot.
True, true. So tell me, Atulaya, so you must have started reading multiple genres of books, and how did reading help you to evolve as a leader in your own, the pre-Atulaya and the post-Atulaya you just spoke about? Could you share a little thought of how did it make you a different person that could inspire budding listeners who are going to watch you?
So you get so first and foremost you become more aware, and
Mm,
the awareness is in two lands. So the awareness is about how much you can become self-aware and how much you can become aware of the whole environment around you. I think
right.
that is an important piece.
Mm,
And reading, not only reading fiction. I think it's I'm not a fiction person, so for
mm,
me reading is more in the land of reading a lot of different stuff. And if I may name a few few of them, and it's a mix of interesting things, right? So
mhm.
whether it's a Netflix story or a Flipkart story, I
Yeah,
particularly like those kind of stories a lot,
lovely.
because they give you a lot of real life practical exposure of how companies have done it, how they have grown, and what you can actually reapply.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think the biggest difference I see is there's so much of reapplication material you get when you read these books.
True,
I just gave
true.
you example of stories at work. So that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
something I practically implemented in my organization, and it's been a good success story at a
Mm,
at a India level that we've done through our value stories, success stories.
mm,
So a lot of reapplication, a lot of personal development, because
mm.
I also read a lot of personal development books. So be it
Yeah.
starting from a Dale
Mm,
Carnegie book on how to win friends and influence people, which I'm sure
yeah.
almost the entire world would have read,
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah. Generations have read it.
generations would have read that book. Or it's a What Got You Here Won't Get You There book
Yeah.
by Marshall Goldsmith, one of my favorites. And as you have to grow in a company, or in your life in general, it's actually your whole development has to be a lot of self development.
Mm,
And I think the big mistake which happens a lot of times is we pass out from these schools or we get into corporate life and
mm.
we stop reading. We become too
True.
much of reading news channels, or watching a lot of other stuff, but we stop reading.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the clear difference is you become much more aware, you get much more contextual
I
information,
agree. I agree.
you look at things differently. I'll give you one simple example. I mean, there was a book called Factfulness, which I read very recently by Hans Rosling. It's a wonderful book which actually talks about how you look at data,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives a lot of examples around what you should not do when you look at data, because how media people use data to really confuse you and
Mm.
negative perspectives on a lot of things, right? So because what is negative or what is exciting is what sells, right? So a
True.
news would come something like this. The headline would read that 10,000 cases of COVID in Mumbai. You will read it and you will feel as if, oh shit, the life has really gone for a toss. But if you compare it with the data, you would see that yesterday.
It's a very powerful concept. You may want to understand a little more about listening as a concept. It's a very powerful book. Inner Critic, Inner Success.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Super, super, fantastic. I think you said very rightly, and Marshall kind of gave that entire meaning of feed forward by adding that word. It completely changed the meaning of that word, which was looked at differently till he came up with this word. So I think fabulous guy and fabulous word. So tell me,
Yeah.
Atulaya, uh, this book also talks about from an inspiration that all of us have is Peter Tucker and Marshall also talks about, which you just mentioned a while back. Peter says we spend a lot of time in telling leaders what to do. We don't spend enough time telling them what stop to do.
Stop. Correct.
Why for you stopping something is also equally important, if not more, than starting doing something.
So the way it works here is that if you don't stop doing certain things, you basically it's a very interesting concept of perception is reality.
Hmm.
Right, in a corporate world, I'll use this word, and I've heard it in various trainings. Perception is reality, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
How you're perceived by somebody is the reality. You may disagree with that, you may say, hey, I'm not like that. It doesn't matter, because in an organization ecosystem, Perception is reality. If you
True.
grow beyond a point, you have to actually change certain things. And
Mm, mm.
when you are actually deliberate about it, and the way Marshall puts it in the book beautifully, that you have to make an advertisement. Right?
Yeah.
You are your own press release, and you have to there and to change that is a very interesting 4-step process that he talks about. Right? To change
Mm,
yourself, how do you do that? You take
mm,
feedback, you apologize, you uh, uh, advertise yourself, and then you do the feed forward,
mm.
which is where you ask people that what you can do differently in
Yeah.
that particular space. So because perception is reality, you got to change. That is the basic principle of,
Mm,
while you are in a corporate scenario. And mostly when we
mm,
talk about CXOs or people who are at very senior leadership positions,
mm.
he says that each one of us has at least one interpersonal behavior
Okay.
which is a derailer.
Mm, mm.
Any successful person has at least one interpersonal behavior which is a derailer.
True, true.
Listening, it could be emotional intelligence, it could
Yeah.
be talking too much, it could be adding too much value, it could
Mm,
be not recognizing, it could be
true,
many things, but
true.
at least one is going to be there. So
Mm,
it's that one which we need to focus on, not the 20. And
lovely.
I think that's the whole idea.
Lovely. I think that's a very nice perspective. And I think it's so important because focusing on that one and stopping doing that itself will give a lot of benefit, right? In fact, one of the leaders who came in this event very beautifully said that, Rajiv, as part of R&R, we always keep recognizing and awarding people for doing something. We should start a concept of awarding people when they stop doing something. That's also should be equally awarded. Why not HR people look at an R&R saying, this quarter, let us look at leaders who have actually stopped one not so good practice consciously, and I'm going to award them or reward them. I think it's a fabulous way of doing things. Uh, yeah, I completely subscribe to what that guest said. Right. So this is very interesting, and you spoke about CXO. You spoke about once you reach there, you kind of start thinking that I know it all, and you kind of get into that success mirage. All of us have a lot of experience that we carry over the years, which is justified, which is validated through the fact that different organizations interviewed you and gave you a position to handle, which means you're doing some good work there. With all this, isn't it good to add value? But Marshall says it's important for leaders to come out of this tendency to add more value every time. Why
Yes.
is it important? Are we not doing injustice to the experience that we have carried on our shoulders?
Yes. So it's a thin line. It's a thin line. I think the way we need to look at it is the leadership has to be in 5 E's, as we call it, right? 5 E's of leadership. So envision, energize, engage, enable, execute, right? So that's what, in a nutshell, what leadership is all about, right? And interestingly, one of the training sessions that I attended, which explained leadership in a very beautiful way. It says that leadership is about knowing when you should be on the dance floor and when you should be on the balcony. So when you go to a desk, right? So when you should empower your people sitting in the balcony, and when you should be on the dance floor actually solving the problem with
Mm,
the team when required. So here, that's where the interesting point is, that
mm,
when you're adding too much value,
mm.
what you're actually doing is you're taking away the whole ownership from the people. Because
Okay.
somebody comes with if it's a brainstorming discussion happening and the leader is the first person to speak, he's actually setting the direction and killing the entire creativity.
Mm,
Whatever you say at a certain level, once you reach, people respect authority, right? Whether we like it
right.
or not, the reality is that if a leader speaks something, 9 out of 10 people will say, hey, this is the best way to do it. A
Mm,
lot of people will not challenge it. So your
mm,
creativity quotient is out of the window,
mm,
not really getting ideas from everybody, and
mm,
you may be actually doing something which you don't like, which
mm.
you have not bought in, right? So it is something coming from the boss, so I don't feel energized, but I have to do it. There's a
True,
difference.
true, true, true.
Aligned to the process and I do it, there's a difference.
Mm,
So that's where, one of the things which he says is leaders should be the last person to speak.
right.
When you're doing this, you can set the direction, you can say this is why we are here, but if you are going to add too much value, including even the project name, if it is getting decided by the and there's a different project manager, by
True.
the way, you're setting it up for a lot of challenges in future. And this is a big watch out. And adding too much value is also a sign of not allowing people to express themselves,
Yeah.
to have better alignment with their teams. I think this can create a lot of issues. It's actually the first habit which he talks about.
I know, I know, I know. So what do you do, Atulya? How do you do whenever you have this temptation to add value? How do you
So
understand?
yeah, sure. So for me, the way I would run it is you should have, you should set the direction, tone
Mm,
for the discussion, and setting the tone is different from adding value. So setting the tone is to clarify the purpose of,
mm,
why we are meeting here. So
mm,
let's say, for example, uh, let's take an example of a capability program that we are wanting to launch for our sales team, right?
mm,
So the discussion is, what is the purpose of our meeting today? Purpose is to design a framework where I am able to build capability to deliver X number of $1 million over the next 3 years. Right?
true,
This
true.
is my vision for the company from a capability standpoint. Now let us understand what do we need to build in terms of skill set. So I will give them the framework. Right?
Mm,
I will set the pillars for them. Then it's an open-ended discussion where we have
mm,
ideas. My intent most of the time is not to be the one-man show, because one-man show is going to always kill creativity. And the biggest watch out in those scenarios is you may end up not getting some perspectives which can actually be very, very critical, right?
mm,
You may actually end up doing something without understanding the context of
mm, mm,
how, what impact it can create on a certain project. And people who are down the ground, you have a helicopter view. Let's
yeah.
appreciate the fact, as a leader you have a helicopter view, but the people down there
Mm,
know the realities of the world. They know
mm,
what is actually, when the rubber hits the road,
true.
what is that is going to fly, what is not going to fly. And of course you should be smart enough to know, uh, to connect with what they are talking. So
Mm,
it's always a balance between the executor, how he looks at things, brings it on the table, it gets brainstormed. You agree, you disagree, you do loud discussions, you do happy discussions, you do arguments. But end of the day, what we agree, we deliver. Right. So
yeah.
agree to disagree, but while we freeze out on the plans, at the end of the day, whether we disagree or not, we are one team. We have to make sure it gets executed.
True,
So
true.
that's the broader framework of how you look at things, and you don't force yourself. A lot of times you have to do it also. I'm
Yeah,
not. You don't have to do it, and you should not be too much of a person who will basically be so super collaborative that you'll
mm,
agree to everything and anything. It's
mm,
not that your job. That's not your job, right? Your job is to listen to everything. Your job is
true.
to understand everything, set the tone for the discussion, and then take a final decision.
Mm, mm, mm.
Consensus, a lot of things.
I think two things that you said made a lot of sense, Atulya. I love the when to stay in the dance floor, when stay in the balcony was a lovely analogy that you gave. I think budding leaders listening to Atulya should understand this. It's a very thin thing to play around, right? Don't stay extra on the balcony, don't stay extra on the dance floor. Both these extras can really be detrimental for the team, isn't it? That's what Atulya is talking about. Very interesting concept,
And
because
one
this
thing,
this
one more point, if I can just quickly
yeah,
add
yeah, please,
on the same piece, is about empowerment.
yeah.
And empowerment in true sense. So personally, my style would be to, if we are doing the first discussion,
Mm,
and if I'm having a one-on-one where I've asked one of the team members to lead a project where he has to align multiple people, I would say, forget my thoughts. You come with your thoughts.
right.
Let's come with what you think about it. I will just set the tone. Let's see how what you bring on the table. So I
Yeah,
always give that space of coming, the first initial discussion happening with what you think, or
true.
what best practices do you see outside, and then you try and build on that.
Mm, mm.
So that's the approach typically I try to adopt.
I think that's a nice approach because we have many beautiful minds in the organization. By doing this, we're able to tap them, right? Else, we may lose on a lovely input that is still in the head, but it's not coming out because you have had the tendency to add value, and that's got arrested in the person's head. Yeah,
Yeah, it
makes
does
sense.
two things. It does two things. So one is, it creates a lot of ownership.
Yeah,
People feel accountability, that hey, somebody is giving me, has trusted me with this kind of
true,
ability. And that trust is one of the biggest things in a boss and a employee relationship, that if you're
true.
able to build that trust, people know you care for them, because, and this is a message to the people, that you care for them because you are actually trusting them with information, that
Mm,
they have the capability to come with something. Of course they know the style, they know things can change, but I was heard, I was listened to. That's
true,
very
true, true, true.
true, and it's a very important starting point for
Lovely, lovely,
approach
lovely.
of a leader, I feel.
Lovely. In fact, very nice. And many years back, I heard this concept which said that when a leader gives trust, it translates into ownership on the shoulders of the team member. For them, it's such a heavy weight of the trust that they want to carry, and the way they want to display and give it back that, I am trustworthy, is by taking ownership and displaying accountability. I think you also beautifully said that. Lovely, lovely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the next thought that I have, which again Marshall talks about, is very, very similar to this adding value. And he says, let me tell you, this won't work, is something that leaders keep doing, right? Uh, by some way, are we not helping the not juniors, but the people who are working with us, who have not probably seen that much of experience that we have seen? By saying this won't work, are we not helping them to kind of quickly arrest those mistakes and move forward and achieve what they want to achieve? In a
So,
way, I don't agree 100% to this of what Marshall is saying, but I would love to hear your perspective.
sorry, you'll have to repeat the question.
So I said that, Marshall says that, let me tell you that this won't work. It's a very normal sentence that many leaders keep telling, and he says we shouldn't do that. Um, I don't agree that we shouldn't do it. We could probably underplay it, but I would love to hear your take on it.
Yeah. So I think it's about the positioning of the words. So if you're going to tell somebody this won't work, it's a very negative statement in itself. Nobody would like to hear that. This won't,
Right.
right? Of course, everybody has a different. If people still don't understand that, it may end up, becoming verbatim in that context that you say that it won't work. But the reality of life is that to say that this won't work, you have to say, can we look at a better strategy?
So it's choice of words you're saying.
It's about the choice of words. It's not about, and you are saying the same thing, but you are saying it in a way which people understand and people appreciate. And again, I just keep saying the same thing again and again, that the more you are able to enroll people in what you're trying to do. Leadership is a much bigger lesson in terms of how do you create the whole ecosystem for your team. Have the right ecosystem. I would not be surprised even if you say that won't work to your people and they would not listen to you. They would still listen to you, but
they would take it in the right stride.
They would take it in the right stride, because at the end of the day, they know you, they trust you, they know whatever is happening is for the benefit of business. We are one team. Have those misalignments here and there, then I think these words become even more tougher when you hear these words. But having said that, in a normal situation, you should position it a bit differently. You can always say that, have we benchmarked with some other, with competition? How would XYZ company do that? Or
Right.
how would some other market do that? Do we have a better approach? Can we look at it differently? Right. So there are ways of putting the same thing. Rather than saying this won't work. This won't work is very negative. Nobody would like to hear that.
I agree. So tell me this, Atulaya, that there are four things that Marshall talks about. I'm going to read this here for you. He says, communicating clearly a vision, one, treating people with respect, uh, soliciting contrary opinions from people, and encouraging other people's ideas. So four, he says, are very important. Now, obviously, you would agree that all four of them are important. We can't deny with what Marshall is saying. But if you were to pick up two that you have consciously practiced, that people acknowledge and always respect, Atulaya, for this, what would be those two from these four? Is it creating, communicating a clear vision? Is it about treating people with respect, or is it soliciting contrary opinions, or is it encouraging other people's ideas? Which are the two?
Okay, it's a difficult one because all the four are very important. I would do all of them. One thing which I would definitely want to bring on the table is a contrary opinion, because and that is one thing which I consciously look for when I'm sometimes when you're selecting your team, right? People who work for you, not everybody should be of similar process, because that doesn't add value. Because when you have everybody thinking the same way, the ideas will be pretty much the same, and right. So you should always have somebody who's a devil's advocate. Let's put it. Right, somebody who we know will speak his mind, and that's always a good thing to have, because the person will challenge you. And it's better to be challenged at a preliminary stage than to be challenged at a later stage where things go haywire. So that is personally something I would encourage. And I would make an admission also here. It's not easy because when you have those kind of people in your team, a lot of times you're under time pressure, you are under stress, you have too many things to deliver in less time, so sometimes you become impatient also.
Yeah.
You don't want to listen to the person, but having said that, it's important to have that person in the team, so that the person pushes you to think
Yeah.
differently. I would say that is one thing. Second one I would say is about setting the vision, because that is to me a very important starting point. And if I'm able to create that buy-in for the vision, I would say 20-30% of the battle is won, because I should be able to excite people. And I'll give you a very simple example of one of the things which I personally was part of for one of the organizations where uh, I spent some time and understood that while we have grown very fast as an organization, we haven't done much for people growth in terms of capability, or what are the skill sets, or how do we do it in a structured way. So I said my vision is very clear, that if I compete with competition who are the market leaders, they are ahead of you on various aspects. And the biggest aspect is, by the way, the whole structured investment on capability that happens there. And I need to create a machinery here where I'm able to churn out people who are capable, who can take on different roles, turn around the whole piece of looking at whole, how you look at building capability for people.
Right.
So that's the vision we started off with, and team related to it, and they understood a lot of things in that. They became partner in the process, and that's how we went ahead with that. So for me, a very important point is also setting the vision, and besides that, contrary view. All four are important, but if I have
Yeah.
to pick the two, these two would be important, because
Right.
contrary views a lot of times uh, will make you introspect, and as a boss you will
I
introspect.
love that. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
may not, you may a lot of times cut the person and say that, or something may come on your ego also. A lot of times when that happens, in that discussion you may not agree, but when you go back, you introspect, you reflect upon it, you may change your behavior,
Quite possible.
change your
Quite possible.
approach also. And you need those people, otherwise you will not have creativity.
Lovely. And people who work with you uh, acknowledge and respect you for these two things that you constantly do, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Lovely.
and it all goes back to trust. I will say that again and again. The whole ecosystem that you create, if people trust you, they will speak their mind. If they don't trust you, it will be a negative speak of mind, which end of the day will derail the whole team.
I
Right?
agree. I agree.
People should be able to speak their mind. It only happens if you have the right trust.
I agree. I agree. Lovely, lovely. You're actually making me think. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. So tell me, Atulaya, one of the things that Marshall talks about in this is the power of apologizing, and he calls it a magic move, right? Uh, for a moment, it sounds a little, what do I say, very idealistic, right? It sounds a little non-corporatish, if I can put that, though I have also spent good 21 years in the corporate space, and I do leadership workshops. I kind of understand it from one side. Uh, why does he call it a magic move? What is the challenge? End of the day, सिर्फ यार गलती हो गया, चलो अब क्या करना, बोलो उतना ही तो बोलना है, दिक्कत क्या है?
दिक्कत यही है कि ईगो है बीच में. That's a दिक्कत for a lot of people. And most of the time I think it's also about what value will it actually add. It's more
I
of a
like that.
behavioral thing, right? So people don't take it that seriously, but in a lot of cases it could be because of they not being trying to look too small in front of their teams or something of that sort. But
Yeah.
but the concept here is that there is a problem. It is proven with some facts and data in front of you, a 360-degree confidential feedback and so on. So I think it's just an admission, right? It's an admission that we goofed up. It's as simple as that. That I'm not a good listener. I take your feedback. That's what you're supposed to say. And it's not that complicated. And I think the bigger interesting part here is the way forward after that.
Yeah,
You
that's
start
important.
announcing that I want to change it. And when you appoint accountability partners who, the best thing would be that you apologize and you give it to the other person and say that can you tell me next time when I don't do this, right? So, or when I'm repeating my behavior, can you actually tell me? So,
True, true.
and there's research and thinking behind this whole piece on apologizing, because when you do that, you actually make the person more love you more than what he would have loved you. And they become more empathetic that you really want to change. So there is a psyche behind that end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Look at the word apology, but if they look at the meaning behind that, it carries a lot of weight.
True, true. And you also realize that it's a very emotional loaded word, isn't it? It's not a lot of cognitive loaded word. Nahi hai. I remember recently, probably I think what a month back, I was driving from my home to office, and I was driving on the left side of the road, and there was a small truck or something in front of me, and that guy suddenly paused and started going slow. And in a jiff, I took a right turn and just went to the center of the road, because of which I kind of hindered somebody behind me. There's a car, and that fellow was honking crazily, and the bike fellow was almost probably shouting. I could hear his yell from back. It took a couple of seconds for me to understand that मैंने क्या गलती किया. I did not put a right indicator to come to the center. I just swiftly moved to the center. It obviously would have created an issue for somebody behind. So this guy bike fellow comes and he's obviously using his expressions. I could see he's yelling at me, putting his hand front and talking to me. I put my glass down. I said, "Yeah, galti ho gaya. I should have put the indicator. Galti se aa gaya. Sorry, very very sorry." The immediate fellow says, "थोड़ा देख के चले सर, आपका गाड़ी भी लग जाएगा." So the anger immediately was empathetic towards मेरी गाड़ी को भी लग जाएगा. So that was a quick shift just because ऐसे गलती हो गया, मुझे indicator डालना चाहिए था, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's what we say, that, leaders or anybody for that matter, you should own up your mistake. And
Yeah.
it's not only about this, the executive coaching part of it. It's also about anything in real life. Be it your spouse, your girlfriend, boyfriend, anybody. Wherever you own up your mistake, you will see a big support and change in behavior. It's a given fact.
Absolutely. Lovely, lovely. So tell me, Atulya, from this book that you have learned and picked up so many concepts, what are two non-negotiable characteristics that you have built in you that has helped you to become the better leader or the better version of yourself? Is the first part of the question. And what would be two strong advices to the budding leaders?
Okay, so first thing which I've learned in reading these books and talking about most of the books we just talked about, be it I will not repeat the names of the book. I did talk about something called Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. It's another book which I like a lot. So for me, the biggest learning is it's about setting the right ecosystem, and it's about connecting with your teams first. Right? So when you get into any role or when you do any assignments, I am of the firm believer that you may be great, but end of the day, when you reach a certain position of leadership, you're only great if you're able to engage and get the job done through your teams. So for me, setting that right culture, setting the right approach of having the right team in place, and most importantly, investing in those teams. A lot of times I've seen leaders say that, hey, I don't have great people in my team, or I don't have capability is a big challenge, but they don't do anything to change that. They change the person, right?
True, true. Easy route.
That's the easy route. So for me, the route would be slightly different. So for me, the route would be more to engage the person. What can I do to make the person better? Invest in capability, attend some programs and give very direct feedback. My feedbacks are very direct in terms of, obviously sandwiched, but very specific that, if somebody is asking you that, why am I not growing? I will tell you that, this is your perception, and perception is reality. So whether you like it or not, you may be thinking you are ready for that job, but your bosses don't think that way. What will you do differently to make them believe? This is the reality of life. What are you going to do differently? Are you going to network better? Are you going to change certain things? What trailers are you going to work on that? And I'll help you in the journey. So for me, setting the right team in place, building that level of trust with people, I think to me that's a very, very important starting point. And I expect the same for myself also. So preferably cultures where you have this thing you have very high energy. So that is one thing which I would definitely point out, which is my learning. And when I read all these books, I just believe that this is something super important for anybody. The second piece which I can talk about is how do you constantly upgrade yourself?
Beautiful.
That is something which I've picked up, and this is about knowing what is happening in your domain, what is happening in the outside world, and books teach you a lot. I mean, there's so many examples you can learn from so
Keep
many.
talking about, yeah.
Building your personal leadership, whether it's about building your people leadership,
Mm.
how you should negotiate. I mean, you can negotiate anything is a book, by the way, which is one of the best sellers.
Yeah.
And you can negotiate anything. That's the book. And I used to consider myself a pathetic negotiator. I was somebody who was always of the belief that I'm too impulsive a person that who wants to get the job done very very quickly.
Okay.
So for me, results, habit of winning is very, very prominent, one of the habits. And that makes you not negotiate that great a lot of times because you always believe that, time is money, right? So you have to do it quickly. But while I read that book, I personally feel I would have improved at least by 1% from zero.
Lovely, lovely.
Because it talks about such interesting skill sets. And while I do negotiations today, even in my corporate life or in my work life, I was able to pick up certain beautiful concepts from that book, and it has actually helped me negotiate. It talks about a very simple thing that don't think that the person is selling the product to you.
Hmm.
Think that you are selling your money to the person.
What a shift of thought, isn't it?
Brilliant shift of thought. Now
ये पूरा नजरिया बदल
negotiate.
जाता है, isn't it? Absolutely.
So that is it. I mean, so personal and people leadership
Right.
is going to evolve only if you're going to invest in your capability. So I think that is something which somewhere down the line, when I passed out, when you start working in the corporate world, depends on the companies you work for, you get those inputs. But somewhere I think I lost that ability to, read so much. But
Right.
when I made a comeback, I realized that wish I could rewind and, go back and read so many books that you see behind. I mean, I have read all of them, but I would love to read all of them. So 2 points. One is, how do you set the culture for your team? How do you manage your teams? Non-negotiable. You have to care for people. That is non-negotiable. Otherwise, things don't happen. And second is, you have to constantly upgrade yourself. I think these two things are non-negotiable.
Fantastic, fantastic. And these would also be the strong advices to the listeners, right? Who are also in their own journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And in fact, while I connect on, not on my channel, but when I do connect with a lot of campuses who sometimes, invite you for a guest lecture or a talk, this is something which I call as, skill of the future, growth mindset, that, this is going to be a very important differentiator between who you are and who the other person is.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference. I mean, the way you talk, the way you communicate your thoughts, the kind of ideas you bring on the table, everything takes a big shift if you read. So if you have to lead, you have to read. I'll keep repeating that.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know what? Recently, I read an article which spoke about a CEO forum kind of a space that spoke about the necessary skills in the 2020s and plus. As I was sitting and reading that article, and I was thinking that people were saying that, Rajiv, learning and development is moving digital, it's going to be more savvy and everything. The top need that the CEOs were talking about is important for leaders to bestow trust and engage their teams, is the important need of the hour. And I was saying, guys, you're talking about this for generations. You're still talking about this as one important skill in 2020, which means this is eternal. Even in this wired world, what matters is that one handshake, isn't it? And that will take you where you want to go. And that's what you're also talking about. Very
Yeah.
true. Very, very true.
Yeah.
Lovely. Lovely.
In
So,
fact, just one more point, one last point that
please.
which I've shared in a couple of forums also, that we always, when we look at Gallup, we say that things that engage are meaningful work. Your boss should be great, and there are 2-3 points which is
Yeah, yeah.
there, right on the top. Learning and development, growth mindset. I think this is going to be one of the big elements in the future, even now, because while we look at the current COVID situation or anything changing around us, it is very clear that organizations who will invest in upskilling and reskilling their talent may be the ones who will engage and attract more talent in the future. Because
I agree.
how much can I invest to make my person employable for next 20 years? Or 15 years. I think this is going to be one big element because jobs have just got wiped out in so many cases, right? So companies were very, very proactive about these elements. I personally believe will play a big role. So that's why I'm a big fan of L&D, and that's the easiest route to build trust with the people, that you care for them. It's the easiest route to deliver business for your company also.
I agree. I totally agree. And you're talking to an LNE guy, so thank you for validating that on this channel. It makes tremendous sense. Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Beautiful. So that was a lovely conversation, Atulya. Thank you for taking out time, coming on this event and sharing your perspectives on a very powerful book. Um, I see you somebody who's very calm and composed in sharing your thoughts. I kind of saw that on HR Shorts, but now I'm seeing it in live. So thank you so much for coming in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
It was wonderful, Rajiv. Thanks for having me on this discussion today. And personally, I really like the concept which you have created here, the leadership elements, and especially the connections with the books that you're talking about. And if anybody could pick up, my last word would be that, last piece of advice would be that if anybody could read at least one book in a month,
So
that would be really great, and pick up anything that you like. It's
absolutely.
not necessary. I have also read Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, right? So so it's, and that also gives you perspective.
It
So
does, it does, it does.
pick up something that you like and just try to read it, and the world is going to change for you. It has helped me personally. I can bet and tell you, you will benefit out of it. So thanks so much for having me. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much. And when things open up and start flying, I look forward to see you in person someday when you come to the city, right?
Definitely,
And the
definitely.
invitation is extended from my side also. When you come down to Bangalore to visit, it'll be lovely to chat up and meet up.
Certainly, certainly.
Thank you, and you have a lovely day ahead. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.